Hey, everyone. Honestly, I never imagined I'd be sitting here, typing out my life's biggest disaster for the world to see, but here I am. Never in a million years did I think I'd be the guy sharing his wife's involvement in, well, orgies. Yeah, it feels insane just to say that. Orgies. The woman I've spent over a decade with, the mother of my children, sneaking off to screw a bunch of strangers. And now, I'm spilling it all out on the internet because, frankly, I don't know what else to do with it. Let me back up a bit and introduce myself. My name's Jackson. I'm just a regular guy, nothing special. I'm 38, married to Elise, the woman I used to think was my other half. We've been married for over 10 years now. We've got 2 beautiful kids together, a nice house in the suburbs, a life that on the surface looked pretty damn good. People used to say we were that perfect couple, you know the type, always smiling at family gatherings, posting happy pictures on Facebook, the whole charade. I bought into it too. I really thought everything was fine. Sure, after 10 years, the spark wasn't as fiery as it used to be. But hell, who still has the same fire after a decade of marriage, right? We had the usual fights, nothing big, though. Money issues, the stress of raising kids, the fact that sex wasn't as frequent or as wild as it once was. That's just life, or so I thought. But then, things started to change. At first, it was little things, barely noticeable. Elise started going out more. Girls' nights, she'd call them. I didn't think much of it. She deserved to have some fun with her friends. But then those nights started getting later. She used to be home by 10, then it became midnight, then 2 in the morning. She'd stroll in looking, well, honestly, like she'd been hit by a bus. Hair a mess, makeup smudged, her clothes all disheveled. When I'd ask how her night was, she'd give me these half-assed answers. Oh, we just had a few drinks. It got a little wild. No big deal. At first, I wanted to believe her. I really did. We've been together so long that it felt stupid to doubt her. But man, something wasn't sitting right with me. The more I thought about it, the more suspicious I got. She was too secretive with her phone. You know how it is, you're watching TV, she's sitting next to you on the couch, scrolling through her texts, and the second you lean over, she tilts the screen away like you're some stranger. That's when it started to hit me. Something was off. One night, she came home even later than usual, and I couldn't take it anymore. "Where the hell have you been?" I asked. She just gave me that cold stare she's perfected over the years. "Out with friends, Jackson. Why do you always have to question me? Jesus, can't I have a night to myself without you breathing down my neck?" That answer should have been enough, right? But it wasn't. Not with the way she snapped. It was too defensive. Too angry. Like she was pissed off that I dared to ask. After that, things went downhill fast. She got more distant, more secretive. And I'll admit, I started getting paranoid. Anytime she picked up her phone, my stomach turned into knots. I'd ask little things, where she was going, who she was seeing, and every time, it was like I was poking a bear. "Why are you being so controlling?" "I'm not a teenager, Jackson, I don't need to check in with you." Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe I was being unreasonable. But when someone you've trusted for over a decade starts acting shady, you can't just ignore it. So, yeah, I did something I never thought I'd do. I put a tracking app on her phone. I hated myself for it, felt like a creepy stalker, but I needed to know. I wasn't about to sit around like some clueless idiot while my wife ran around doing God knows what behind my back. The app gave me a front-row seat to the truth. Over the next few days, I tracked every move she made. She wasn't at restaurants or bars with friends. No. She was going to random addresses in parts of town we never even went to. The more I watched, the more I realized I wasn't crazy. I was right to be suspicious. And then, one night, I got the final blow. She wasn't at some girl's night out, she was at a goddamn sex party. That's when the ground beneath me just crumbled. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, shattered. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't fucking believe it. My wife, Elise, was attending sex parties. All those nights she said she was with her girlfriends. She was screwing strangers, multiple people at once, like it was some twisted hobby. I'm still trying to process it, honestly. I wanted to confront her right away. The anger I felt. I don't even have words for it. But I didn't. I held back. Why? I guess because I wanted to have a plan. This wasn't something I could just explode about and move on. This was deeper, darker, and I knew if I handled it wrong, everything would go up in flames. After the shock of discovering Elise's double life, I was left with two choices: confront her right away or dig deeper. My gut told me to wait, to see just how deep the rabbit hole went. The idea of confronting her without all the facts made me feel weak, like I'd be giving her the upper hand. No, I needed more. I had to know everything. So I did what any man in my shoes might do. I started investigating. Through the tracking app and some careful snooping, I learned more than I ever wanted to about where these so-called girls' nights were taking her. It turns out, there were secret locations all over the city, places I never would have imagined my wife even knew about. These weren't clubs or bars. They were private houses, mansions, tucked away in the nicer parts of town. You had to be invited to get in. And Elise had clearly been invited a lot. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I needed to see it for myself. The curiosity, the anger, the disgust, it all became too much. I found a way to get into one of these places, posing as someone looking to join. The host didn't ask many questions. Guess they didn't care who I was as long as I followed their twisted little rules. The night I walked in there, it felt like the ground under me disappeared. Everything was so surreal, like I'd walked into the bowels of some nightmare. People, half-dressed or fully naked, moving from one room to the next like it was the most normal thing in the world. And then there was Elise, in the middle of it all, laughing, smiling, and doing things I never could have imagined. I couldn't tear my eyes away, but I didn't want to look either. My stomach twisted into knots as I watched her with not one, but 3 different men. I was hidden, blending into the background, recording the whole thing from a distance. Every second of that footage felt like someone driving a knife deeper into my chest. This wasn't the woman I married. This wasn't the mother of my kids. It was like watching a stranger, someone depraved, someone who had thrown away everything we had for this. I stayed until I couldn't take it anymore. By the time I left, I had hours of footage. I should have been devastated, right? And I was, for a moment. But then, something else took over, a cold, calculated anger. The shock wore off, and it was like a switch flipped inside me. I didn't see Elise as my wife anymore. She wasn't the woman I'd loved for over a decade. She was a fraud, a selfish bitch who had destroyed our family for her own sick pleasure. I wanted her to pay. And not just some simple, oh, let's get a divorce and move on, type of deal. No, I needed her to feel it. To hurt like I was hurting. So, I went to work. I spent the next few weeks gathering more evidence, meticulously cataloging everything. I followed her to more of these events, tracking her every move, building up a file that was impossible to deny. With every new video, every photo, every detail, my disgust grew. Not just with Elise, but with the people she was surrounding herself with. They were all disgusting, every last one of them. These weren't normal people, they were predators, feeding off each other's filth. And Elise? She was right there in the middle of it, as comfortable as ever. At home, things were weirdly normal. Elise would come back late, exhausted, smelling like booze and perfume, and I'd pretend I didn't know a thing. I'd ask her how her night went, and she'd lie right to my face. Oh, it was great. Just me and the girls. Sometimes I'd ask her if she ever wanted to slow down, spend more time with the kids, and she'd laugh it off. I deserve to have some fun too, Jackson. Don't act like I'm doing anything wrong. It was infuriating. But I kept calm because I had a plan. Confronting her wasn't enough. If I just yelled and threw accusations, she'd deny everything or, worse, twist it around to make herself the victim. No, I needed to hit her where it hurt. And that's when I realized how I could do just that. Elise had one person she truly respected, her mother, Grace. Now, Grace and I never had much in common, but I knew one thing: Elise cared deeply about what her mother thought. Their relationship had always been rock solid, and Elise always sought Grace's approval. That was her weakness. If I could bring Grace into this, if I could make her see the kind of person her daughter really was, it would tear Elise apart from the inside. So, that's exactly what I set out to do. With my plan locked in, it was time to set things into motion. I knew the best way to hurt Elise wasn't just to confront her, it was to tear down everything she held dear, brick by brick. And the first brick? Her mother, Grace. Elise worshipped her mother, always seeking her approval, always needing to be the good daughter in Grace's eyes. That made Grace the perfect target. So, on a Saturday afternoon, I showed up at Grace's house, a bottle of wine in hand and a friendly smile plastered on my face. She greeted me warmly, as always. Grace was a kind woman, the type who had no idea the kind of person her daughter had turned into. I almost felt bad for what I was about to do. Almost. "Jackson, it's so good to see you," she said, pulling me into a hug. "It's been too long since you've stopped by." I played along, making small talk as she led me inside. The house smelled of fresh coffee and cinnamon, the kind of homely warmth that made you forget, for a moment, the chaos waiting to unravel. After a while, Grace opened the wine, pouring us each a glass. We sat in the living room, chatting casually. I waited, sipping slowly, letting the alcohol do its work on her. Grace had always been a lightweight. A couple of glasses in, and she was already loosening up, her smile a little wider, her words flowing more easily. It was time. "Grace, there's something I need to talk to you about," I said, setting my glass down. My voice was heavy, serious. She furrowed her brow, sensing the shift in tone. "Is everything all right, Jackson? Is it Elise?" I nodded, letting out a sigh for effect. "It's about Elise. But, it's not something easy to say." Her concern deepened. "What is it? You know you can tell me anything." I leaned forward, looking her in the eye. "Grace, Elise hasn't been honest with you. Or with me. There's something she's been doing, and it's bad." Grace's face went pale. "What do you mean? What has she been doing?" I pulled out my phone, swiping through the evidence I had painstakingly collected over the past few weeks. "I don't want to show you this, but you need to see the truth." I handed her the phone. Grace hesitated before taking it, her hand trembling. As her eyes flicked over the screen, her face contorted with disbelief. She looked up at me, her voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" "It's Elise," I said coldly. "This is what she's been doing behind our backs." Grace scrolled through the photos, the videos. The look of pure horror on her face was exactly what I had expected. It was like her world was crumbling before her eyes. Tears welled up, spilling down her cheeks as she continued to watch her daughter, a woman she had always thought was pure and good, engaging in the most depraved acts imaginable. This can't be real," she muttered, her voice cracking. "Elise wouldn't, she couldn't." "It's real, Grace. I've been watching it unfold for weeks." She's been lying to all of us. I thought you deserved to know." The tears came in full force then. Grace broke down, sobbing, her body shaking with the weight of the betrayal. I sat next to her, pretending to be the caring son-in-law, putting my arm around her to offer comfort. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to keep this from you, but I couldn't let you live in the dark." Grace leaned into me, her sobs growing louder. The woman was completely shattered. And I knew this was only the beginning. That's when I made my next move. Seeing her like this, broken, vulnerable, needing comfort, it was almost too easy. I knew exactly how to play it. I tightened my arm around her, pulling her in closer, whispering soft reassurances. "We'll get through this. Together." The wine had loosened her, the emotional wreckage had broken down her defenses, and before long, things escalated. One thing led to another, and soon we were in her bedroom. I don't need to go into the details, but let's just say, I made sure I got it all on camera. Every single moment. This wasn't about attraction. It wasn't even about Grace. This was about Elise. About taking away every single thing that mattered to her. She revered her mother. Looked up to her. And now, I had shattered that relationship. I had corrupted the one pure thing Elise had left in her life. As I left Grace's house that night, my phone full of incriminating footage, I felt no guilt. No shame. I was just getting started. With everything I needed in place, it was time to execute the final blow. The weeks of meticulous planning, the constant surveillance, and the cold calculations had led to this moment. I wasn't just going to confront Elise, I was going to dismantle her life piece by piece, just like she had done to mine. I spent an evening organizing the videos, making sure everything was perfectly labeled and edited. The videos from the sex parties, each one a nail in the coffin of her double life, were going to be my weapons. Elise had lived this secret life for too long, hiding behind the mask of a devoted wife and mother. That mask was about to be torn off in the most public, humiliating way possible. Once everything was ready, I took a deep breath and clicked upload. The videos were sent to a website where content like this would get plenty of attention. I didn't stop there. I carefully crafted an anonymous email with a single link to the page, then I sent it to a very select group of people, her closest friends, her colleagues at work, and even a few family members who I knew would spread the gossip like wildfire. The effect was almost immediate. Her phone started buzzing just hours later, and I watched from across the room as her face shifted from confusion to horror. She tried to keep her composure at first, staring down at her phone, her fingers trembling as she opened the messages. I didn't say a word. I just waited, watching her unravel right in front of me. I could hear her breath quicken as more messages flooded in. Her friends, colleagues, family members, all of them were bombarding her with the same questions. How could you do this? What the hell is wrong with you? Is this really you? Her face drained of color as she realized what had happened. Every dirty secret, every shameful act, was out there for the world to see. Her pristine image, the one she worked so hard to maintain, was obliterated in an instant. "Jackson," she finally stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Did you do this?" I looked at her, calm, collected, and shrugged. "What's the matter, Elise? Can't handle a little honesty?" Tears welled up in her eyes, and for a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the countless nights she had lied to me, the way she had shattered our family for her selfish desires, and the sympathy evaporated. She tried to call her friends, but no one answered. I could hear the desperation in her voice as she left frantic voicemails, apologizing, begging for someone to believe her side of the story. But there was no coming back from this. Her private life was now public property, and there was no way to undo it. And just when she thought it couldn't get any worse, I dropped the final bomb. I opened my phone and sent her one more message. The video I had taken with Grace. I watched as her phone pinged again. She stared at the screen for a second before opening the file. Her reaction was instant. Her entire body seemed to collapse in on itself as she saw the video of me and her mother together, her final anchor in life now ripped away. She dropped the phone, covering her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "You dragged my mother into this? How could you?" she screamed through the tears. I didn't flinch. "I told you, Elise. You ruined everything we had. Now it's my turn to make sure you feel the same." She fell to the floor, broken, sobbing in a way I had never seen before. But it didn't move me. Not anymore. The betrayal, the lies, the humiliation she had put me through, this was just her reaping what she had sown. Over the next few days, her entire life unraveled. Friends cut her off. Her job, where she was once respected, turned its back on her. Even her own family wanted nothing to do with her. Elise had become a pariah, and there was no way out. The videos spread like wildfire, and everywhere she turned, she was reminded of what she had done. But even as I watched her life crumble, there was a strange feeling that settled in. A kind of emptiness. The revenge had felt satisfying in the moment, but now that it was done, I wasn't sure what came next. I had taken everything from her, but I was left with this hollow space inside me. I convinced myself that it was justified, that she deserved every bit of the pain I had inflicted. And maybe she did. But the weight of what I had done, of how far I had gone, lingered in the back of my mind, gnawing at me. With Elise's life already torn to pieces, I made my move to end things officially. Filing for divorce wasn't just a formality, it was the final nail in the coffin. The courtroom became the stage for my final act of revenge, with all the evidence I'd collected laid out for the judge to see. Every video, every text, every picture of her at those sex parties was right there in front of everyone. She sat across from me, hollowed out, knowing she couldn't defend herself. How could she? There was no coming back from what I had. I'd made sure of that. The divorce process was swift. The judge saw the situation for what it was, a husband who had been betrayed in every possible way, and a wife who had thrown away her family for her own selfish desires. The ruling came down quickly. The house was mine. The car was mine. Full custody of the kids. Mine too. Elise didn't even argue. She knew she couldn't. She just sat there, staring at the floor, a shadow of the person she used to be. After the papers were signed, I walked out of the courtroom, feeling like I had won. I had taken everything from her, just like she had taken everything from me. But as I stood there outside, the weight of it all started to settle in. Elise had nothing left. Her friends had abandoned her. Her family didn't want to speak to her. Her career, which she had worked so hard for, was in ruins. She was utterly alone, and I had made sure of that. At first, I felt a rush of satisfaction. I had done what I set out to do. I had destroyed her life as thoroughly as she had destroyed mine. She was nothing now, a pariah, hated by everyone who knew her. And it was all because of me. But as the weeks passed, that feeling of victory started to fade. The house felt too quiet. The kids were with me, sure, but their laughter didn't fill the space like it used to. Elise had brought a kind of energy into the home, even when things were falling apart. Now, it felt like I was living in a museum, cold, sterile, lifeless. Every time I walked through the hallways, it was like I could still hear the echoes of the life we used to have. The arguments, the laughter, the love, even if it had been tainted by her betrayal. I thought seeing her suffer would make me feel better. I thought that watching her life implode would give me closure, some kind of twisted peace. But instead, it left me with this gnawing emptiness that I couldn't shake. I'd look in the mirror, expecting to see the man who had triumphed over his unfaithful wife, but all I saw was someone who had gone too far. Someone who had lost more than he ever intended. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything I'd done in my mind. The secret videos, the manipulation, dragging her own mother into the mess. I had become someone else, someone consumed by revenge, driven by a need to destroy the woman who had betrayed me. But now, standing in the aftermath of it all, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The person I used to be was gone, and what was left was just empty. Elise, for all her faults, had been the woman I loved. She was the mother of my children, the person I thought I'd spend my life with. And while she had shattered that dream, I had obliterated whatever was left. I didn't just end our marriage, I destroyed her, and in doing so, I destroyed a part of myself. Now, every day feels like I'm living in a void. The house is mine, but it feels like a tomb. The kids are with me, but I can't escape the feeling that I've taken something from them too. They've lost their mother, not just because of her choices, but because of mine as well. There's no satisfaction in this victory. There's no peace, no sense of closure. Just an aching silence that follows me wherever I go. I thought revenge would heal the wounds Elise had caused, but instead, it's deepened them, leaving scars I don't know how to heal. I got everything I wanted. And somehow, I lost everything that mattered in the process. It's been almost a year since the dust settled, and I've been trying to figure out what my life looks like now. Honestly, I thought by now I'd be in a better place, that time would heal the wounds, that maybe I'd feel some kind of relief for the choices I made. But the truth is, I'm still trying to pick up the pieces. I guess that's why I'm back here, writing this. Maybe it's some kind of therapy for me, to put it all down in words, to see if any of it makes sense. After the divorce was finalized, I did what anyone would do, I tried to move on. I got the house, the car, full custody of the kids. On paper, it looked like I won. But the reality? It's been a lot more complicated than that. The first few months were the hardest. After everything went public, Elise disappeared from my life completely. She packed what little she had left and moved out of the city. I didn't hear a word from her after that, not even a phone call asking about the kids. At first, it felt good, you know? Like, I was finally free of her. But then came the questions from our children. Dad, why doesn't Mom call anymore? Do you think she'll come to my school play? Those were the kinds of questions I dreaded. How do you explain to your kids that their mother isn't the same person anymore? That the woman they once adored made choices that led to all of this? So I lied. I told them she was busy with work or needed some time to figure things out. I couldn't bear to tell them the truth, not yet. They still ask about her, but less and less these days. I think they're starting to understand, in their own way, that she's not coming back, at least not anytime soon. In the meantime, I've tried to focus on rebuilding my own life. I threw myself into my work, taking on more hours, pushing myself harder than I have in years. I guess I thought if I just kept myself busy, I wouldn't have time to think about everything that happened. But, of course, that was just a temporary distraction. The nights were the worst, especially after the kids went to bed. The silence in the house was deafening. For a while, I even tried dating. I thought maybe a new relationship would help fill the void. I went on a few dates here and there, but every time, something felt off. It was like I was going through the motions, but my heart wasn't in it. Maybe it's because I'm not ready, or maybe it's because I'm still haunted by what happened with Elise. Either way, none of those dates went anywhere, and eventually, I just stopped trying. I still see Elise pop up on social media from time to time. She's tried to rebuild her life, but it hasn't been easy for her. After the videos came out, she became a social outcast. Her friends dropped her, and even her family, including her mother, distanced themselves. I heard through the grapevine that she's been bouncing from one low-paying job to the next, barely scraping by. There were even rumors that she tried to start a relationship with some guy, but it didn't last long. I guess even he couldn't handle the fallout from everything that happened. A part of me feels sorry for her. Despite everything she did, despite how she ripped our family apart, seeing her like this. I don't know. It doesn't feel as satisfying as I thought it would. I imagined that watching her life fall apart would bring me some sense of closure, but it hasn't. All it's done is make me realize how far we both fell. As for me, I've been trying to be the best father I can be. The kids are my priority now, and I want to give them a sense of stability, even though their world was turned upside down. We've had our good days and our bad days. Some nights, they cry themselves to sleep, asking why mom doesn't call or why she's not around anymore. And I don't have the answers. I wish I did. I've also started seeing a therapist. At first, I was skeptical. I didn't think talking about everything would help, but it's been eye-opening. It's made me realize just how much I've been carrying. The guilt, the anger, the regret. I thought I was justified in everything I did. I convinced myself that it was revenge, that Elise deserved to lose everything. But now, I'm not so sure. There's a part of me that wonders if I went too far. Did I really need to destroy her like that? Did it make me any better than her? I still struggle with those questions every day. I don't have the answers yet, and maybe I never will. But I've started to accept that what's done is done. I can't change the past. I can only move forward. The one thing that keeps me going, though, is my kids. They're the reason I get up in the morning, the reason I keep pushing through the tough days. They deserve better than what we've been through, and I'm determined to give them that. I'm doing my best to make sure they don't carry the weight of their parents' mistakes. As for Elise, I don't know if she'll ever be a part of their lives again. Maybe one day, when they're older, they'll reach out to her. Maybe they'll want answers, and maybe she'll be ready to give them. But for now, it's just me and them, trying to find our way. So, that's where I am now. Still trying to figure it all out. It's not easy, and I'm not sure it ever will be. But I'm learning to live with the choices I've made, for better or worse. If there's one thing I've realized, it's that revenge doesn't bring closure. It doesn't heal the wounds. It just creates new ones. And now, I'm left trying to heal from those too.